shore fishing I really enjoy is lure fishing, and in particular lure fishing for sea bass. You can travel light. All you need is a light lure rod and reel, a small bag with a few bits of spare tackle, and off you go. It's good exercise, wandering the shoreline, trying different spots in an effort to find a fish, and it can be exciting. You can cast that lure 100 times or more for nothing, then suddenly, bang, you get a take, and that take can be within 2 turns of the reel or at your feet, just when you're about to pull the lure out of the water. I'm heading off here to a mark I fish around the low water period, and if it's going to produce fish, it's usually about 1 hour before low water and up to 3 hours of the flooding tide. In 30 years of bass fishing at the various marks I fish, both from the shore and the kayak, I have always found the low water period more likely to produce fish than the high water period. At this mark, the average size of the bass is up to about 4 pound, with a 4 pound fish being a good catch. The minimum size limit for bass in Cornwall at the time of making this video is 37.5 centimetres. However, if I do take a bass for the table, I have my own personal size limit of 42 centimetres, which I have increased this season from last season's 40 centimetres. If I'm lucky enough to catch a bass over 5 pound, I return it. Apparently, female sea bass do not reach sexual maturity until they are between 40 and 45 centimetres, and females tend to be bigger than males. Therefore, although I like to take the occasional bass for the dinner table, I try to do my little bit for conservation. This video was shot over a couple of sessions using plugs as lures over shallow rough ground. Due to wind noise on a few of the shots, some of the commentary is narrated. The ground I'm going to be fishing over can only be described as rough. It's a mixture of rocks. There's isolated rocks, rocks and weed patches, and weed covered rocks, and just generally weedy. Therefore, floating diving plugs that only dive shallow are ideal, where you can, at times you've got to skim the plug when you've only got literally about a foot of water above the rough ground. Therefore plugs are ideal. It's also ideal ground to go plugging for bass. They'll move in as the tide floods. I'm going to be fishing the last hour of the ebb tide and the first few hours of the flood tide, which is the time of the tide that I find is most productive. And as the tide floods in, the bass will move over the rough ground looking for their prey, whether that be crabs or sand eels or small fry, as the tide floods in over the rough ground. So that's the ground. It's a little bit murky at the moment, close to shore. I've got a wind here. I'm going to try and use the wind and get the wind behind me to make it easier to cast. So we'll give it a go and see if I can catch a bass. Taking a look at the tackle I got with me today, I've got 3 plugs with me. These are 3 shallow diving plugs, and they're suitable for the ground that I'm fishing over. And the first plug is a tackle house feed shallow, and this one only dives to about 30 centimetres. Absolutely brilliant lure, and I've caught an awful lot of bass with it, got a lovely action with it. You notice there I've changed the trebles for decoy plug-in single hooks rather than trebles, and I'm experimenting with it this year, this season. And the main reason is that one, they're easier to get out of the fish and cause the fish less damage, and 2, when I'm on the kayak, if I do need to net a fish bass in, it prevents all the trebles tangling in the net, which can be a bit of a nightmare to get them out. Second plug, another shallow diving plug. This is the IMA Kimono SF125. Again, only dives to about a foot, and with both of those plugs I can skim them over the rocks and over the weed, and if I hold the rod up at an angle about 45 degrees, I can literally just work them under the surface if I need to when I'm working them over over rough ground or rocks or weed. And lastly, I've got a Savage Gear Prey 130. I believe they're called Savage Gear Tuned Prey 130 now. This is the older version, which did have 3 trebles on it, but I've replaced the trebles with decoy single hooks. And this one dives a bit deeper. This one will dive to about 40-50 centimeters, so it dives a little bit deeper. When the tide floods in, I can start using this lure, and there's more ground covering the weed and the rocks. I can use this lure if I want to. So I'm going to try the different lures and see which ones are working. I'll probably start with the tackle house feed shallow, and then if necessary change lures. Rod is 8 foot 15 to 50 gram lure rod, spinning rod. Got a 4000 size spinning reel loaded with 20-pound braid, and tied to the end of that I've got a couple of feet of 15-pound fluorocarbon, and that's just joined there with a double uni knot. And to the end of that is a small link, which makes it very, very easy for me to change lures when I want to. Alright, so that's the tackle. 3 plugs there. If you've seen my video, Top Sea Bass Lures, I talk about these plugs and go into them in more detail. But these are 3 plugs that I've found that consistently catch bass, have done for me in the past. Just casting out the plug here, and what I'm trying to do is vary the positions that I cast rather than casting in the same place, and that's to cover as much ground as possible. Also varying the retrieve, sometimes just a steady straight retrieve, other times a retrieve and pause, and other times a quick slow retrieve. As you can see, I'm into a fish here. It's not a big fish, but it turned out to be a nice fish, and this was caught on the tackle house feed shallow. It's a great lure, and for me it's a must lure, particularly when I'm fishing over shallow rough ground. This fish measured 42 centimeters. Back down to do a bit more plugging for bass. The good news today is I can do live commentary. There's not a lot of wind around today, and unfortunately I'm not blessed with BBC style equipment, so wind noise can be a real problem when you're trying to talk when making a video. It's peeing a rain, so there might be a bit of rain on the lens. But the upside is it's very quiet here today. It's mid-afternoon in early August, and of course it's be a lot of holiday makers around, and usually this will be very, very busy. But it's very, very peaceful and very, very quiet today, and hopefully there'll be a few fish around and I can catch another bass. Well, it's absolutely tipping it down now. I must be absolutely mad. The things us fishermen do to catch fish. Although I must admit these days I'm a bit more of a fair weather fisherman, but I didn't expect these showers to be quite as heavy, so I'm out in it now, so I might as well carry on, get wet and hope for another fish. On the second cast I'm into a fish. It was within couple of turns of the reel, and it definitely feels like a bass. So we'll see what sort of size it is. Once again, this is on the tackle house feed shallow. It's coming in pretty quietly at the moment. I'm not so sure. Well, this one's just a small bass, although it's over the legal size limit. It's bang on about 40 centimeters, so I'm going to put this one back and hope for a better quality fish. One thing I have found that works occasionally when you're plug fishing for bass is when you cast the plug and it hits the water, is don't start retrieving straight away. Just pause a little bit and then start retrieving. And then sometimes you'll find you'll get a take within just a couple of turns of the reel, as I did the first bass today. I think what that might be is that the splash on the water might attract a bass that's in the nearby vicinity, and then if you pause a little bit, it gives it a chance to get to the lure, and then of course as soon as you start retrieving, if it's interested in it, it'll grab it. I've often found that that works, and it's something that I always do now. Oh, I just had a little knock then, but it didn't take it. And that doesn't necessarily mean it was a bass. It could have been a garfish, of course. But yeah, just a little knock then of something. Could also be mackerel, because even though I'm fishing in shallow water at times, if the mackerel are around and there's bait fish around, they'll come right into these shallows, and I sometimes do catch mackerel right in the shallow water when I'm fishing for bass. Quiet now as regards the fishing, so I thought I'd take this opportunity to show the action of these plugs I've got with me today. First is the tackle house feed shallow, and I'm hoping you can see that. It's got a nice sort of rolling, wobbling action. Get that again. Just on a steady retrieve, and when you can feel that on the rod tip. You feel a vibration on the rod tip. So it's got a great action, and there's definitely something about it that the bass like. Okay, so that's the tackle house feed shallow. And now we'll have a look at the the IMA Kimono SF125, and to be honest, it's similar. I mean, it's a rolling, wobbling action. Once again, it sort of rolls a bit more. You can see that it rolls a bit more than the tackle house feed shallow. Again on a steady retrieve. And now the Savage Prey. This is the Savage Prey 130 mil. And again, lovely wobbling action there. So another great lure, and this is a sort of minnow type lure. I hope you can see that. Well, I mentioned in the introduction there how sometimes bass can literally take right at your feet. Well, that's what happened with this one. It literally took this plug about 10 feet away from me, just when I'm thinking I'm going to get nothing on this cast, and then I suddenly saw a flash, and then bang, and there's a fish. And this one's a better one. This one's a better one than the first one. And it just goes to show these plug-in single hooks having treble has no disadvantage whatsoever. They still catch bass, they still hook the bass just as well as treble hooks. I'm going to call it a day now. As regards the weather, it's been absolutely awful this session. It hasn't stopped tipping it down for the whole session. But as regards the fishing, really pleased I came to get the couple of bass, although they weren't huge bass, but they were a couple of nice bass. As always with bass fishing, I find you get these short windows of opportunity where you get a bit of action and then suddenly the bass are gone. And it's just a matter of trying to make yourself available to be here at the time when you're most likely to get that short window of opportunity. And like I said earlier, in probably 90% of all the venues that I've fished over the last 30 years here in Cornwall, I always have found that it's the low water hours that are most likely to produce fish for me. And when I say low water hours, I'm talking the 3 hours down to low water and the 3 hours up. Those middle 6 hours around the low water period seems to me most likely to produce fish. Now I know, of course, there are other venues around the country where high water would be the time to fish, but for me low water has been far more productive than high water. So for those of you that are struggling to catch bass, I hope you found that useful and there was a few ideas for you for your own fishing. Like I said, the only advice I can give based on my 30 years experience is think low water, not high water, and also think shallow, not deep, as you saw today and on the previous occasion. The bass I caught were in very shallow water, and sometimes the bass will come in right into sort of a foot of water and take that lure. And also I find it's far more productive to fish over rough ground rather than clean ground. Now I know you catch bass from beaches, on open sandy beaches with a bit of surf coming in, and I fish on them myself in the autumn. But when it comes to lure fishing, I find it's much better over rough ground. There's far more food available for the bass in rough ground areas than there will be in clean ground areas, particularly in calm conditions. So although it's difficult fishing at times to fish these rough ground marks, if you fish the right tackle, as I fished today with the shallow diving plugs and maybe weedless soft plastics, you can fish these areas with ease. And it's very rare these days that I lose a lure, lose a plug. It's just a matter of choosing the right lures. So once again, hope you found that useful, and many thanks for watching.